Good morning, good afternoon, or good evening, whenever you're watching or listening to this, and welcome to Link Up Leaders, your direct link to leaders in supply chain and e-commerce. My name is Lisa Kinski. I'm your producer and co-host, and joined as always by Francois Jeffrey. Francois, good afternoon. How are you, dear?
Good afternoon. Doing great. How are you?
I am doing well. I think the rain has finally moved out. I'm just ready for the
Good.
sunshine. I was so worried. I'm just worried it's going to be rainy and gross on Memorial Day. And I plan to be doing nothing but sitting next to my apartment pool. And it needs to be sunny. It needs to be hot.
That's one of the only ways, aside from like going to the lake or to the beach, you have to be by a body of water. I feel
Yes.
to like enjoy Memorial Day or like 4th of July. It's a body of water holiday.
Yes, it certainly is. And I've always wondered if people like, because you grew up in Arlington, and that's like close enough to like, the coast and like
Virginia Beach and Ocean
yeah.
City
And being where I grew up, we have big old Lake Altoona, and we're also on the coastline. People go to Savannah and stuff like that. I wonder if people in like middle America also have that desire to be by a body of water, or if they do other things.
Probably have a pool. Probably pools.
But in some places it just gets like too cold. I
don't know. We'll have to do some more digging into that
more
after
research.
The show. Yeah, we're coming up on Memorial Day weekend. It is the last week that unfortunately we will be joined by your is it feathery friend?
My feathered friend. Yes.
Yeah, your feathered friend.
Well, we have an episode on Friday, right? Hold on, let me double check the calendar. We have today, and then we have it's loading.
Well, it's the last week overall.
This Friday we have an episode with Michael Epstein, and that will be the last day that we're hearing Zelda and all of her phone notifications and whistles and tunes. But yes, my feathered friend.
Your feathered friend. As fun as it was to have her on the entire time, I think we can move past it for next week.
We can. You know what? I'm good with not sounding like I'm in an aviary. Our guest was really excited about her, though. I guess I can bring her on board. So, I'll grab her real quick. I'll show the people. But let's go ahead and bring on our guest first. So our leader today is Josh Dittrich with brandedseller.com. I don't know why that was such a tongue twister for me, but Josh, how are you doing?
I'm great. And you guys were just talking about bodies of water, and I got really excited because we're heading to the lake as well. And we're in middle America. So the Midwest is best. Minnesota has 10,000 lakes. So we will be joining our lake very soon on Friday.
I did not know
10,000? But
plus
how
or minus
big are they? Are they like...
Well, it's a thing here. Like people have lake homes, like part-time, seasonal, or year-round. Like it's what most people do in the summer. Seriously, their summers are gone. Like church attendance is like less than half. It's crazy. And that's not a COVID thing.
Interesting.
Yeah, it's a real thing. Bodies of water. You said it. So I don't know if you could see me, but I was in the background going, yeah, I love bodies of water. 4th of July, Memorial Weekend, Labor Day weekend. Yeah.
Well, now we know. Now we know what they do up in Minnesota and Minneapolis.
That's facts.
Well, and I always know those to just be like cold states. I call Minnesota Minnesota. So I just assume nobody has a pool up there because it would just be constantly frozen.
Yeah, we're actually putting one in as we speak, and that's why I was talking about the rain. And that pool will be available from June until September. That's all we get.
Okay.
Maybe October. And that's kind of like the lake. So you get the same kind of season a little bit, but you get the fall, which is nice. But every season has an amazing, except for winter, just not good. So just keep that one out. Spring, summer, fall, pretty amazing. Yeah.
Yeah, but winter sucks. We've got Rhea from Seller App tuning in. Hey, Rhea, it's good to see you. Rhea. Thank you for being here. So Josh, go ahead and just tell us a little bit about yourself and about Branded Seller and how you got into the e-com space.
How long is this question? Is this like from the origin story, or where do you want it?
Well, you don't have to go back. Have you been on Yoni Mazur's show, Prime Talk? Okay.
Oh, not Prime Talk. No, I've been on his other one.
Oh, okay. Well, you don't have to go back as far as you go with Yoni, because Yoni...
he wants all of it.
He wants all of it.
He wants your childhood and everything.
Yeah, he does. Yeah. Maybe start with Post-college.
Well, that's cool because it's perfect. Well, post-college is the cheat. I think I need that. So I'll start with, I moved to Minnesota like 20 days after I graduated high school in Iowa. And it was like, you got to get out of the small town, move to the city. And that's what everyone does, because if you stay, you become a townie, right? So you have to like escape. So that to me led to Minnesota to do video broadcasting, which, in e-commerce now, video is very relevant. So I do have some background that's crossed over into the work I'm in now, but not at all by purpose, like completely on accident. But a video broadcasting, no bachelor's, no master's, guy from Iowa came here just to figure out, how to make a life. And started at Best Buy. And so college translates sort of everything for me. And my first experience of, taking care of an apartment and roommates and rent and cell phone and insurance was like, 18 years old. And so getting a job while I was going to college, that led to Best Buy corporate. And for me, that was really amazing opportunity. 7 years of seeing, Fortune 50 company do world-class things. And, that was through the heyday period too, where they were really growing and expanding stores. And I started to get the itch there. I was like, I'm just a cog in the wheel. This is a massive company. And the itch was, I got to go somewhere smaller where I can make my footprint and sort of get messy. And at Best Buy, it was just way too not messy, right? It's just the opposite. Everything is precision and polished. We were in a smaller group inside Best Buy that was more like a startup, but still very big picture corporate. And so for me, I wanted to make something and build something. And I had an opportunity while I was at Best Buy actually to work as a contractor on the side with one of my clients. So I was doing B2B sales. This is where I learned about, how to move product and build a business around relationships and, suppliers and customers and how that whole product model worked. But it led to a customer that recruited me to help sell for him on the side as a side hustle that turned into a full-time job, and which required me to pack my bags a couple days a week and drive 100 miles one way. Well, I had a wife and new kids at home to the startup with like less than 10 employees, right? Leaving Best Buy. And so from there, though, the progression was like, wow, okay, this small company, we have opportunity to grow. Sky's the limit. Inc. 5000, we had 10 employees. And so we're going to keep growing. And that was the plan. So over the next 7 years, we grew that business from 10 employees to 100 plus. And over 50 million in revenues, 95% of it online. And that's where I learned all things, supply chain, product marketing, technology, PPC, SEO, right? The gamut. And I learned it on someone else's dime. So this company grew very rapidly, but the vision and the mission around, like, it started to become very corporate all of a sudden, right? The small startup 7 years later needed to have infrastructure, needed to have a leadership team, needed to have department managers. And for me, like, I'm kind of cowboy. Like I see something, I want to go after it. And then if I make a mess, I have a team that can clean it up. And so fortunately, I'm living my best life right now. And after building brands, leaving that company we helped grow to start a brand, grow that brand to 10 million and then sell it, is sort of where we are today. And so I'm just fascinated by the space and the opportunity to build something, create something, put your name on it, and kind of figure out how to do you in the best way. And that's what you're most passionate about and what you're very talented at. So I'm pleased to say Brandon Seller is that for us now, where we actually meet with sellers on a regular basis to understand sort of where their goals are, how they're going to scale, and help them efficiently get there.
That's awesome. That's a true entrepreneurial story. And I'd love to explore one piece of it. As you're starting with this startup, what was the biggest challenge that you faced? Aside from, of course, when they went to more of this corporate model, was there anything particularly difficult part of the process that you faced?
Yeah, so there's two sides of that. One is, a company that existed, I came on board with 10 employees, right? The one I left Best Buy for. And that one was like, how do we build an infrastructure? How do we build an ERP? How do we pick, pack, and ship fast? How do we import? How do we private label, right? And private label in 2010 wasn't really a thing. We were selling branded products. And so our biggest challenge was like crossing this line into, we sell everyone else's GE and Samsung and Frigidaire and 3M, and every filter you can imagine to selling and promoting our brand. And so we had a site as well as a very large marketplace, multi-channel business. But we took both as learning opportunities to position our private label in front of the brand that we already had traffic coming to. These are repeat buyers buying water filters. So we were able to serve them up side by side, this lower cost alternative, which really translated to the world of Amazon and other brands sort of evolving to say, hey, there's these other national brands out there, but they're charging way too much. The value isn't there. And so this idea of, if I can choose a product in, water filters today, why can't I do it in any other category? So the second challenge in the startup was just scaling from the beginning, which is, a product idea. So the first one is building infrastructure, right? That's where I learned infrastructure. But then the true startup came with, here's $10,000, give or take, and we're going to start a brand, and we're going to grow up to 10 million. And we didn't know that. But at the time, it was everything, all things, like starting from scratch. What are you going to use for technology? How are you going to track inventory, right? All the same stuff that we had already learned, we were able to apply into our startup, the one that we just recently exited. So, yeah.
And were there any pillars to that infrastructure that you can sort of point out? And that way, really, I feel like a lot of businesses, particularly that started on Amazon recently, or in the past 5 years or so, are still trying to navigate sort of what is the proper infrastructure and what should they be focusing on, because there isn't, there is if they take it from brick and mortar and maybe even from a few pieces of other companies, but this is very unique, right? Everything is digital, everything is online, and now everything is remote too. So it's even building an infrastructure for that.
100%.
Can you maybe walk us through some of the important aspects of what businesses should be paying attention to in an infrastructure?
Yeah, it's a great question. And so I was able to learn sort of early on that positioning your product where the customer is, right? So you have this product and there's markets out there. Amazon is a channel or a specific market. In our case at the time, customers are shopping on Home Depot, they're shopping on Walmart, they're shopping on eBay, they're doing Google searching, right? They're looking in data feeds for comparison shopping engines once upon a time. So those things, aren't as trying to build. I think the big infrastructure piece is those brands that currently primarily import from China directly to FBA are pretty much left with a unique business model. The challenge has become now is like, how much inventory do I actually need to have there? How much inventory will Amazon allow me to have there? Because let's be honest, the amount of MOQs you typically need are going to be greater than what Amazon is willing to allow you to store in their facilities. So a lot of things have shifted into 3PL. And so for us, building that infrastructure was like, all right. And we sort of got lucky because we bought a business prior to starting our Amazon business that had a warehouse, that had a couple of employees, right? That had day-to-day operations already going. And so we had a choice to make. Do we build an FBA only business, or do we build a brand that's exposing the product to where the customers are searching? And so going into it, we knew to be able to do that, we needed to be able to pick, pack, and ship. We needed a system that would track inventory. We needed to be able to allocate inventory to certain channels, right? And not sell through and sell out. We needed to build a system around not having out of stocks and having enough inventory online. So a big one was for us building a very smart Google spreadsheet to help us understand how to plan for how much inventory we need to bring in. Then we also did kitting and assembly. So then we had a plan for how much we were going to build. And then we had a plan for how much we were going to send to FBA. And so I think everyone has the challenge of planning, but the infrastructure gets far more complicated when you have inventory in the US, you have it in Canada, you have it in UK, and then you have it in your own warehouse and you're doing fulfillment, right? So I think the big question people have to ask is like, where do I really see this brand going? And meeting the customer where they are might start on Amazon, but there's a real opportunity to expand beyond that and consider retail, consider other dropship channels, Bed Bath & Beyond, if it's in that product category where you could simply create a product feed and do fulfillment, right? But that infrastructure requires people building in technology to do that. It's usually the biggest leap, Francois. So I think when you're asking that question, it's the difference between, hey, everything's easy and digital, to, wait, I have a lot of product and I need a lot of space and I need people to manage it, right? And so that's a tough one. And people starting out, I don't see a lot of people going, I started in my garage and FBA was amazing, but I wanted a warehouse. And it's like, well, no, FBA allows you to scale without the need of a warehouse, right? But you got to think through that. And you can outsource everything now. So why not? It wasn't as easy as it was, I would say, 10 years ago, so.
Yeah. No, it definitely seems like it's getting more complex, which is great. And conversations that we've even had this week have been centered around, data and the maturity of companies that are able to use that data for speed, really, in making those decisions. One thing that you mentioned before was your value of relationships. And I'd love to touch on sort of how relationships played into building this infrastructure. A lot of times I feel, coming from more the supply chain side and our other business for sourcing from Noviland, it tends to be very transactional. It's, hey, give me a price and I'll take it or I'll leave it and I'm going to move on if not. How did you incorporate relationships into building this infrastructure?
Yeah, I mean, 100% of our, testament to success, if you call it, was aligning yourself with a manufacturer that has capabilities, not just a product, right? And so sourcing products, it might start with, hey, I'm trying to build widget A, but after we've, and we actually had this relationship conversation for myself years prior to that, which was when you're nobody, right? And you're trying to call a manufacturer, this is back in the day when you're trying to sell other people's brands. So the wholesale part of the e-commerce world, you had to convince a supplier that you were unique and special and that you weren't just selling on Amazon or you had some, right? So relationships have always been important. But when you talk about factories, a lot of them just want to make that widget and go, or you just want to source that thing. And I don't care, how many different suppliers I have because everyone's giving me a great price. Well, for us, we started actually domestically in our supply chain. And we had a guy, a very amazing guy, is around 30 years, started his own thing overseas, moved here, built it from the ground up, 200,000 square foot warehouse. But the relationship we invested in was customization of liquids and formulations. So our products were very much liquid focused, but because we had a great working relationship in the beginning with one product, for us, it was all about what else can you make? Okay, this guy is unique because he can make anything. Okay, so how do we target liquids in a way, the unsexy liquids that have good market upside, that aren't being that are potentially being dominated by larger players, but usually not, and work with him to then make this our roadmap to scale up. So for us, that means, how do we get our MOQs low? How do we give them a pipeline? How do we create a process to track and understand where each product was in the development cycle? So we launched, 130 original products, probably 300 ASINs with multi-packs or SKUs, I would say. But 70%, 60% of our business was with this one supplier, all based on how do we do what the manufacturer can do to make it the right thing for the consumer. And then beyond that, in China, for us, it was, it does start with price, but keeping in mind, again, their capabilities, right? So if their specialty is rubbers or plastics, now if the next you can broaden your horizon. That when you see something, you're not just going to go find something that's already been made. You could potentially partner with that same manufacturer and consolidate those two products that you buy and save on the inbound shipping portion of it, rather than trying to source from this guy and this guy and this guy. So building those relationships, it's as simple as saying, well, what else do you carry? What else can you make? And then that relationship develops over time. Well, let's try this one. And so for us, I mean, like literally in the last 17 years of business, relationships in the supply chain drive everything, right? Access to product, preferential treatment on pricing, preferential treatment on limited supply. Like, how does that work? A lot of times you reserve your inventory when inventory is tight for your highest margin customers. And so all these things play a factor in relationships.
Yeah, definitely. That's something that I think Francois has definitely talked a lot about too, is like just really kind of building out on those and treating people right, not being transactional, like you said, and, maximizing on their capabilities, like you said too, like what else do you make? What else can we do here? I wanted to pivot a little bit to talk about your exit and maybe a step before it, of what were some of your steps as the brand owner to deciding that you wanted to exit possibly, and then what did you have to do pre-exit, and then what did the exit look like? How did that work?
So for us, 2021 was a very interesting year, a great year, because we had a business that we bought in 2019 for $750,000. It was losing $300,000-400,000 a year, but it was just mismanaged. And we knew that with our warehouse, with our skills in marketing, with our facility and distribution, we could reduce all those costs, bring it in house, and then we grew the business. So we took that business from losing money to making $500,000 a year. We bought it for $750,000, sold it for $2.5 million. So that one started first in 2021. We actually listed with a broker and intentionally listed it because we saw the rise of COVID. We were selling hockey training products. And when kids are locked inside, what a great thing to be able to send them in the basement and work on stick handling and passing and shooting. Sure. So we had a nice rising tide happen there and said, to see this continue, we're probably going to go backwards before we continue to go forward. So we decided to exit. Well, it wasn't just an e-commerce transaction for us. We're like, we have something unique. We're B2B, we're B2C, D2C, and then also marketplace. It wasn't just Amazon, right? So we used a broker because we needed a large database. Through that journey, I realized, holy buckets, there's these things called aggregators, these buyers called aggregators out there that showed some interest in our brand, but quickly realized that was the brand that we should not sell to an aggregator. It was our other brand. And so we ended up selling both brands in 21 within a month of each other. One with a broker that we paid 10% commission on. So we paid them $250,000 on a $2.5 million deal. Okay. The other one was a $10 million deal, the brand that was primarily Amazon. And so I led that process. I built a list and went after 30 aggregators, spoke to about 23 of them. And we ended up getting 6 offers and negotiated our way into a deal, which from our point of view, we maybe saved $800,000 to $1 million and not paying a broker. We incrementally increased our exit value by leveraging multiple offers to negotiate our price. And so that evolved to like this thing that people are thinking in their minds like, hey, I grew this business, I built this business, but yet I need to hire a broker to sell it. And so my whole thought process was, I built this business, I know it better than anyone, and I'm going to use my skills and develop relationships to market my business, to sell it. And so the outcome was significantly better in the process to sell that business on our own as opposed to hiring a broker. Not only did I talk to better buyers with deeper pockets, with the right business model to roll into, it just seemed like the right timing. So we weren't planning to sell that business. That one was like, wow, look at the multiples that are increasing. Look at these offers. Maybe we should consider selling. So it went from selling the other one intentionally to accidentally trying to sell the other one to full on blitz to sell and exit. Yeah. So yeah, hopefully that kind of makes sense, because I think if you think about the two buckets, that experience in parallel doesn't usually happen. And so it really inspired me to say, hey, there's got to be a playbook out here. So I wrote the book called Aggregator Navigator to really help brand owners understand that journey and that process as it relates to time and the actions they need to take inside their business now.
That's such a unique experience to be going through the sales process of both channels simultaneously.
It was.
And I would love to hear you and Joe from Quiet Light just have a conversation. That's all that I want. I just want to bring you both on and say, talk.
Well, I guess
that would be great.
To that point, do you think you got any benefit in learning from what the broker was doing with you?
Yeah, so we bought a business prior with a broker, and so we kind of understood generally like how they would interact, right? What their role would be. So we had some taste of that. And then the broker we ended up hiring in 21 was, one of those things where the taste was obviously bad. Like it inspired me to say, I can do this better than them. Like the turnaround times to create a 2-page PDF about us should not take 30 days to get it listed. Like I built a 60-page PowerPoint, in a few days that I was using to go find buyers, in days, right? So like, these are the things you run into. And what's their real role? Usually it's 2 things. 1, find the buyer. Okay. 2, help you navigate and negotiate the best outcome, right? Because they're incented as well. So you can find buyers pretty easy right now, especially if aggregators make sense as a buyer. You can find them all. They'll talk to you right now, right? So I think the digital world has changed that need. There are relationships that brokers have, absolutely. But our belief was that we could go find those relationships. The second was, if you have any business experience building a P&L and a balance sheet and understanding how those things work, knowing your numbers lets you, and knowing the market lets you sort of consider, how am I going to increase the value? So in both regards, we felt like we did it better just because we were in it and we were more personable. Now, that could have been our experience with this broker or this particular individual, but it's not uncommon. And on the flip side, there's the other story. A guy knows nothing, has a great business, and just wants to support, right? So I have broker relationships because there are cases where a broker is the right fit, right? So to each their own. My real model, my real thinking is, if you can start a business on your own by bootstrapping it and watching YouTube videos and watching webinars and going on podcasts like this one, you could probably do the same thing to learn how to sell your business, right? And so that's sort of the journey. And to your point about talking to Joe, like that would be counterintuitive to Joe's argument maybe. And Joe, bright guy, but brokers make sense for you and they have to make sense for them. So yeah, different experience, but it was fun, both of them.
Well, good. And then, so just talk a little bit about the aggregators themselves, because you've dealt with them more recently, and obviously you have your book. What's kind of going on with them right now? Because I feel like I got into the Amazon space, just shy of 2 years ago, and well, the e-commerce space overall, supply chain, really splitting hairs, but they were everywhere. Like, Thrasio was getting huge. Like all these businesses were getting bought up. It was like every other week, somebody was posting that they had just purchased a brand or a brand owner had just sold. And I feel like that's kind of getting quiet. So like, what's happening? What has happened and what's going on? Why are they?
So I think at a high level, to sum it up, most things are driven by the economic engine that they are, and relied on supply and demand, right? So let's back up. You have millions of Amazon sellers with no buyers. This is 3 years ago, right? Okay. Millions making $5,000 a year to $5 million a year to $50 million a year, right? In profit, perhaps. And so if you think about that, you have all these brands, but no buyers. Well, that means no one really wants them, which means multiples are low, right? And one particular group had the start on it, and that particular group exploited it 2.5 times EBITDA or SDE. And so, great, that makes sense. I would love to buy a business for 2.5 SDE right now, right? Send them my way. But now you see second, third, fourth, 30, 100. Now you have a lot of buyers all wanting that same business, right? So supply and demand. Now you have a large supply of buyers driving the prices up for the sellers to be able to maximize their exit, right? And so now we get to this peak, which is over the last number of months, we're seeing the slowdown. The slowdown is internally, businesses were previously ran by owners and maybe an outsourced person, right? But now they're ran by dozens of people on teams, right? And so the infrastructure, if you think about that, they're really betting high on the ability for these teams to grow these brands. And some of that stuff comes at a cost, right? And so I think the normalization is happening, that they could grow indefinitely and that growth would not catch up to them. But at some point, your operational expenses do when you're burning cash. So I think that's what's happening, is that the more prudent, slower to act, due diligence focused groups are still doing deals. They're just being more mindful of what really is lasting. Not any brand with a pulse anymore, something that truly is differentiated, right? So now they can be more selective. So we're just in another phase. That brands that are the most valuable, brands that have some sort of IP, have some competitive advantage over a Chinese seller being able to just make it and go, some sort of value add. And if you think about all those things, it ultimately still has to be making money. The thresholds have changed. So rather than the guys who bought us, Elevate Brands, they in the beginning were like, yeah, we like brands that are at least $1 million in SDE. And now they're up to 2 million minimum, right, in profit, which means they're probably buying brands that are in the $30 to $40 million revenue space, right? So a lot different businesses, and it forces everyone to get better. Competition makes us better.
Well, and forgive me if I missed it, but what happened to create all of a sudden that interest in buying up these brands? Like you said, 3 years ago, there were a bunch of brands and nobody wanted to buy them. What happened?
So, I mean, 1,000 plus were bought. Some of the best ones were cherry picked, right? Which leaves now what we would call brands that are really seller accounts with some label on their product, right? So what you have is the cream of the crop has been picked. There's still good brands inside there, but they're a different level than maybe the first round was, which also means the fear of multiples going up on brands that they bet on previously aren't panning out, right? So if you buy a brand that's not a large growing brand that has a lot of SKUs in the past that have recently been added that are going to continue to grow, unless you put a lot of fuel on that fire, those brands are just going to go through their normal organic growth. And when you bury that with expenses to try to grow them and you don't, or not as much as you thought, the needs for buying businesses go down, which means there are more brands that are out there and less buyers that want them. So we're moving back to the old, right? More brands without lots of buyers. So, and I think the criteria is different now. So you have tightening criteria and a whole lot of brands that maybe buyers don't really want, right? So
what can brands do to, aside from the obvious, let's say with Elevate increasing their what they're looking for from 1 mil to 2 mil SDE, what can they do to really be as attractive as possible to potential buyers?
What can the buyers do to be attractive?
No, what can the
brands do? Sellers,
yeah, the brands.
Yeah. I think that's a good question. You have to kind of go into it with this vision, mission, purpose of your brand, right? It's sort of old school marketing. What is your storyboard? What is the brand story? And if it makes sense on a product listing, on one product, that's the best thing about Amazon. It doesn't have to make sense as a brand if you see a product when you're typing in like diapers, right? And like it doesn't have to be anything fancy. And so you have this massive gap between products that just exist and do well because they're one of the only options, and those that have invested in good marketing and a brand promise, right? And being transparent on where they source things and how they make things. And so a lot of that, some of that's puffery, right? Or sizzle on the steak. But ultimately I would say that cohesiveness on what that brand is, the products that it has, the differentiation in the market. If you can tell that story, that puts you in that bucket of an actual brand. The first bucket of brand is I put a name on it, right? I can put a name on anything, and call it a whatever this is called, thermos. I don't know.
I think they're called tumblers now.
Yeah, right. And now they were supposed to be for coffee. Now I drink them in water, and like so applications change, right? And so brands that create a promise like that can do better. So I wouldn't say go spend a ton of money on branding per se, but I believe 9 out of 10 listings that I see aren't raising the bar. They're just trying to catch up. And most of them I look aren't just spending the $100 or $200 or $300 to go to Fiverr and find someone, or Upwork or find an expert. They're not investing in that way. So business is performance. Brand is the resonation of the customer and who might buy it. And, it's that sexy, cool appeal. I don't think that sells businesses. I think a sexy business is a business that's growing, profitable, large numbers, and have that core sort of mission. Like our product assortment was kind of like, I know there's a lot of sayings, toothpicks to bubblegum, or, you could say the diversity of it, but the brand was essential values. And the idea was that everyday living items that are essential in your home that don't break the bank. So it was a value play on what Great Value is doing with Walmart, or what Up and Up is doing with at Target, right? Right next to the ibuprofen, the Advil brand, you're going to see Up and Up's, Target's brand of ibuprofen. And so that was the model we took, and we created this brand to be able to tell the consumer, when you find us shopping for this product, we are going to create value, and you're going to see a great listing, and you're going to see great images. It's going to answer all of your questions. And, if you don't like it, return it, that type of thing.
And are you seeing, Maybe more on the aggregator side. So on the buyer side, are they looking for businesses that are solely on Amazon, or are they now, I guess putting a higher weight to those that are multi-channel, that might be in retail, that might be also on, Walmart, or have a great D2C channel?
I would say it's a mixed bag. I would say that generally speaking, the original model was as much on Amazon as possible, 80, 90%. Brands or buyers have reduced sort of that high, concentration on Amazon to as low as 50-50, 50-50 being Amazon and 50 being other. But I will also say this, some channels aren't worth the effort, right? And so we've had channels that were shut off by our buyer because they just didn't create a return. And so you have to decide going into it, what that looks like. But as another group I'm talking to, like large presence on QVC and very small presence on Amazon. And so when you consider that, like, okay, becoming a vendor of record for QVC might allow for lots of innovative products to hit that market. And so they can acquire not only the brand and what the performance is, but now strategically a channel that they can access, right? And that's the same with Walmart or Target or any mass retailer. If you do an asset purchase, though, you're not getting necessarily the rights to that contract because the legal entity is the entity that holds the vendor of record. So there's things involved there that could be a strategy, absolutely, where they see value. That's what I would do. How can I take my entire catalog now and move it into Target? How is that going to work? It's going to be a lot easier now that I have a vendor of record, right? So.
Yeah, it makes complete sense. And another question, I think it's definitely been top of mind for me. I'm assuming for anyone within operations, it's been top of mind for them. But are you seeing them try to transition out of Asia and finding supply chains, for example, in Mexico?
I think ourselves have explored that. We've also looked at other options like Taiwan, India, and places like that have maybe been underserved in terms of manufacturing and leveraging what they've built over there. I would agree. Tariffs made changes very difficult a couple of years ago with Trump's changes there, and some of that stuff is being rescinded now. Some of it's being added. It's crazy, but we didn't have to deal with that for 70% of our business sourcing domestically, and so we very carefully chose the products where there was a clear economic advantage of being of sourcing in the U.S. So, for example, if the product savings would be eaten up by the shipping, right? Is that alone? Is it worth changing? Okay, maybe not. Maybe it's the same cost after you take in freight, right? Because let's say you get a discount on the product, but now you pay freight. So your landed costs are the same, but then you have concerns of, well, if it's coming from China now, you still have an additional tariff potentially, as opposed to the U.S. But the U.S., with certain sources of raw materials still being in shortage, it's not a perfect supply chain, right, across the board. But I'd say, there are plenty of opportunities still out there where by the time any Chinese seller that you're competing with potentially decides to bring that product to the U.S. and pays the ridiculous freight rates right now, and obviously that'll normalize, but that's going to put them out of contention in some cases to be that right price point. So I would say it's a mix. I definitely heard more people trying to source here, though. For us, it's always been a focus.
And I guess we'll give a quick plug to our friend Amy Weiss too. You opened the door, I've got to take it. She is hosting the Mexico sourcing trip from June 4th to the 9th. So coming up here in not very long, she's offering an opportunity for people to visit factories, attend the first trade show of its kind. I am going to mess up this pronunciation, Evolatam, Evolatam. I have no idea how to pronounce that. And then there's also a mastermind that everybody can attend to. So we'll go ahead
in Cancun, I think, too.
In Cancun. The mastermind. So the mastermind is in Cancun from the 9th to the 12th. So there's an opportunity for you to go. And I like how she's done this. You can go to just the trade show. You can do just the trip, or you can do just the mastermind, or you can do two of them, the first two or the latter two, or you can do all three. She's like, mix and match your cart and just come when you can.
Yeah.
Wow, that's incredible. Much. So part of that opportunity is the mastermind, but paired with a trade show for sourcing in Mexico.
Absolutely.
Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah. And that's brilliant. I mean, think about the population there and the infrastructure that they have. And a lot of times we're like, we don't understand. Americans don't think to go there, but and I think the Alibaba of Mexico perhaps would help, if there was,
It would.
it would be natural, it seems. But yeah, sourcing from a country where your access is Google as one thing in a different language, as opposed to a central, and there's a lot of ways, right? There's a lot of ways, but that makes a lot of sense.
Yeah. Yeah. And so pivoting a little bit, I'd like to talk about the differences between aggregators and accelerators, and when is the right time to approach an accelerator?
So we kind of put ourselves in that accelerator bucket because the way we look at business, it's not just marketing, it's not just 3PL or operations, and it's everything. It's running a solid business. So we apply the accelerator terminology to really look for the activity cost that is eating your margin, and find ways to streamline that. And that could be in the product price, it could be in the research of the keywords, it could be in how we import or how we do fulfillment or how we plan and how much we buy, right? So an accelerator for me is a very tight marriage between marketing and ops, sales and operations planning, right? And so that means, where are we going? How are we going to get there? And then being tight enough with your supply chain that the left hand can keep up with the right hand, right? And so many times you got a business that's like, oh, the listings are great, the paid search is great, but they're never in stock. Okay. Or they have way too much stock and they're not selling as much as they want. Like, why would you want an accelerator to just accelerate one area, right? What does that mean? So for us, it's like, how do we create a more profitable, valuable business that becomes an asset that can be sold, right? And so that's about reducing all the touches. It's about streamlining. It's about growing. It's about doing the best practices. It's about creating world-class listings and advertising them, using third parties, off Amazon to drive traffic from to Amazon. So yeah, accelerators versus aggregators. Aggregator is a buyer, right? An accelerator is going to be a group, an agency, or a partnership, or an entity that somehow has skin in the game to help you go to the next level. And it's usually done in the marketing side, though. Is that kind of how you would see it?
Yeah, that's sort of what I've picked apart from it. But I guess I was still curious about, how long does a brand typically work with an accelerator, and at what point do they start to have those conversations of, hey, we do need to accelerate either marketing, or in your case, which I love, is merging both marketing and operations, because that seems to be the topic of conversation throughout the entire pandemic, right? No one knows what to do with both sides.
Yeah.
Right. And that's why we saw a gap, and it's very obvious in the aggregator. So after we sold our business, we kept them around as a client. We actually just passed our 1 year. We renewed with them. And so part of our model is like, aggregators have capital, they have some good marketing ideas, but like, how do they put all of this together, right? And so we've partnered with them to continue on that and keep things in sync. But to answer your question, I think brands that have sort of passed that first 2 years, that have this, hey, we figured it out attitude, but I really want to double down, right? That I think is the criteria. Those that are eager to grow, eager to learn, eager to try, but have potentially an exit in mind, right? So you can grow without the chance of an exit in mind. Absolutely. That would just be like an agency. But I think the accelerator model is usually, the way we like to see it is rapidly expanding the ability for the business to grow. And then you have another phase of, there's a timing of when that value has been realized. And so we like to do that second part as well. So just helping them grow is one thing, but is that revenue? Is that profit? Is that percent margin dollars or margin percent? How do you measure success? And so for us, we partner with brands where we know there's operational challenges, we know there's marketing challenges, but we believe under the hood is a really core set of products that aren't being exploited in the way that they should. And so that would be one where we go, let's get excited about this. And like most brands I talk to are like, yeah, I think I want to sell someday. No one's married to these. These aren't your children that you birthed. Like, you've started them, great, but you can let go, especially when you're trading, a business that's a cash suck. Investing in inventory is a cash suck. to paying you a lump sum right now to sit on the beach or go build your next thing. So I don't know. We went on a tangent slightly, and the question is great.
Yeah, well, the question can go in so many different directions, but it keeps sparking more questions. So, for example, if a brand is working with an accelerator and they plan for an exit, do they let the aggregator know that they've been working with, X accelerator? And, I guess what confidence does the aggregator have that accelerator, once they leave or they go out of the picture, that everything is going to continue growing at that pace?
Yeah, that's always the gamble. I think the missing gap at the aggregators are they've hired talent that maybe haven't necessarily been the owner operator in the trenches, right?
Mm-hmm.
And so on one hand, they actually maybe spend a ton of money on an expert in one area, but on the flip side, that owner operator, someone like myself, may not be the expert in these areas, but can do all of these things, right? And so what's the right recipe? And so for us, let's say you were to call us an aggregator, we like distressed assets. Thinking about a fix and flip home, right? And as you see value by knowing how you can improve it, right? So an aggregator isn't going to necessarily, they might even overpay for a business to win because they're that confident, regardless of who's helped them get there, the owner operator or an accelerator. The most interesting, appealing brands to buy are those that you can translate to actual activity to implement in your business that will grow it, right? And when you have that level of confidence, you can make bets. And so I think that there is a gap there in knowing where the brand is. And so for us, a way to measure that, and for the audience, it's about market share. So for example, if you sell widget 1, 2, 3, 4, and 5, you should be able to tell yourself, with all the tools that exist today, how much market share you have with product 1. Are you 10%, 20%, 30%? Because that lets you know how much more juice is worth the squeeze. And putting your money, doubling down, tripling down on going from 10% to 20% is a real life example where you go, hey, the listing stinks. They don't have FBA even going. Like, let's do 2 or 3 or 4 or 5 tweaks here. And I'm very confident we'll get that, market share increase. So measuring that actively, regularly, gives you a baseline index. And if you don't know how to create the numbers, do a BSR, bestseller rank index, and track those for all of your competitors. Who's trending down and who's trending up, right? And so that's a way to capture, are you impacting the market share? But that's how I would buy businesses. And I don't think a lot of aggregators are thinking always in that way. They're looking at the great asset that potentially could be amazing, right? And so it just depends on the buyer, but fix and flip buyers are still out there.
Yeah. There's a lot of them. Definitely. I feel like every time I open up LinkedIn, I see a new one that's starting to talk about their launch of them starting to gobble up brands. So on the topic of market share, I know you mentioned that there might be a few tools out there. When you talk about market share, do you mean Amazon market share or just total market share?
Well, I think it's important to know to distinguish both. Absolutely. I think those are two things: market share on Amazon and total market share. I think total market share is very much harder to calculate, right? So for retail, there's retail indexes out there that track this data that you can subscribe to give you a sense of what retail volumes exist. You have Google, right, that gives you access to trends and keyword volume. You can try to capture some market share there. But I think the most tangible method is the Amazon method, because if you think of it this way, let's pretend that 50% of e-commerce is Amazon and 50% is scattered across. Well, I'm going to go to the place where the 50% is in one spot, as opposed to 5 and 8 and 7 and 10, right, across the different markets. Sure. So if I'm looking at Amazon, I can very quickly determine my revenue as opposed to my competitor's revenue. Right? There's not many places in the world that you can quickly walk into a store and go, that guy's killing it and that guy's terrible. Right? Best Buy, Walmart, they don't have any of these metrics available, but Amazon sure does. And they want you to know that, because they want you to be turned on to the idea that this item sells. You could sell it too, right? It's genius.
Yeah, it is. And so in improvement. So you mentioned, for example, BSR and tracking how you've improved your BSR versus the competition over a certain amount of time. Would you recommend that they document every tweak that they've done to be able to pass that on to the aggregator? Does that make it any more valuable? Is it data that they even care about?
Yeah, it's funny you ask. For example, we have a legal document that shows we cannot use these two colors in our logo. And I was doing a little check-in on one of the brands we used to work with and saw this old logo pop back up. And I'm like, so did they look at the notes? I mean, someone might have once.
Yeah.
But I think you're right. Like so for example, our spreadsheet that we track inventory we have for years and years, week over week over week over week. Even in those cases, changing price, you might see it, week over week, conversion rate impact week over week, but we're not going in and notating those as well as you should. But I think that's smart, right? Because you don't want to have to test and retest and test again when you have history, right? So I love the silver bullet. Everyone thinks they have one. And so here's what I found. Whatever you've done in the past, great. Your value is this, but we're going to do something else afterwards, after we buy your brand. And it might even be the stuff you've already tried, but that doesn't matter because we're so confident that things we're going to do next are going to be the thing that moves the needle, the silver bullet, right? So you have a lot of that does happen. I mean, they're trained to be that way, right? They're touting their buyer services, their experience, their knowledge, their skills. So I guess that's what you do.
Right.
Well, and as we're nearing the end of the episode, we actually always give our guests an opportunity to plug their business and give kind of an outline of an optimal client or a best fit client. But you also just released a book. So I want to give you an opportunity to talk a little bit about the book as well.
Yeah. As I mentioned early in the beginning, that my motivation was like this idea of financial freedom, independence, and having time with my family. I have 5 kids, 3 dogs. We're busy. And so I want to have that choice, and selling the business sort of really opened the door to that. And so my motivation after selling, I was interviewed and featured in a Business Insider article. That really was fun to do. It was like, man, there's so much knowledge in here that I've gone through over the last number of years, both from my startups world and my own, experiences, that I'm pretty sure others that take courses and watch shows and do YouTube videos would appreciate this little tool that would only take them an hour to read. So it's 99 cents on Amazon. It's called Aggregator Navigator, your ultimate playbook to maximizing the exit of your brand. And the brandedseller.com is our current business that we are aiding brands that have operational marketing challenges, that are intentionally trying to scale and grow their business, that hopefully eventually want to exit. Those are our top clients. We handle everything from the 3PL stuff to ad management to listing creation, all the way to finding you the ideal buyer and helping you see that come to reality, that exit.
Fantastic. And those URLs, well, I'm not going to read the URL for the Amazon listing because, of course, it's just a bunch of letters and numbers. Yeah, all of that. But the full title of the book is the Aggregator Navigator, the ultimate playbook for selling your Amazon brand successfully. You guys can find that on Amazon. I will link that in the description of the audio and the video. And of course, Josh's site is brandedseller.com. Quick and easy. We love those. Josh, are we going to see you at any of the upcoming shows, or do you have anything? You were in Business Insider? Or are you going to be on, I don't know, Shark Tank for something soon? Like, what else is coming up?
Who knows?
Forbes?
Man, I was actually noted in a Forbes, but I didn't get the full feature. I'm trying to do more PR. It doesn't feel comfortable. Like, I love the podcast because I feel like, this is how I work, right? Get to know me, get to talk with people. I was never the cool guy that would show up in the nightclub and all the chicks were dancing with me because I'm only 5'5" and whatever average looks. So my point is, getting to know people, getting to know me, my business, and my story. We can help a lot of people, and we'd love to help others. So you can find me on LinkedIn. Please do. Josh Dittrich.
Awesome. Well, Josh, thank you so much for being here. We really appreciate your time today.
Thank you, guys. I didn't hear any more parrot either, though. So
I know. Like I said, she talks a lot only when I'm talking. So once I stop talking, I give her a little bit, and she
That's why you're so quiet.
I muted it and I was like, I need her to shut up.
You nailed it then.
But awesome. Thank you so much again. And thank you for everybody who tuned in today. If you guys liked what you heard, please be sure to give us a thumbs up, comment with your thoughts, share this episode with your friends, subscribe to the show, and be sure to turn on those notifications. And that way you guys never miss a conversation with leaders in supply chain and e-commerce like Josh Dittrich with Branded Seller. And we will see everybody again on Friday, and then have a happy Memorial Day weekend if we don't talk to you after that.
Thanks.
Bye, guys.
Bye.